You're listening to the Modern Healthcare Back Office, a podcast dedicated to solving the billing issues and gridlock facing the healthcare industry, presented by ProChamp, hosted by Chuck Ellis and Rachel Schools.
Well, hey there, folks. Chuck here, and welcome to another edition of the Modern Healthcare Back Office. I am joined by my amazing co-host, Ms. Rachel Schools. How you doing, Rachel?
I'm fantastic, Chuck. We dodged those tornadoes yesterday around here, so it's a good day.
Yeah. It's interesting. For those who don't know, Rachel, you live in South Georgia, and I live in North Florida. So I always get like a little preview of the weather. I don't even have to have the weather app on my phone anymore because Rachel will be like, oh, there's some big winds coming through. And sure enough, like 2 hours later, all of a sudden it'll be like, oh, we got some big winds.
It is.
Who'd have thought?
It's the way that the storms move diagonally. So usually,
Yeah,
Chuck, there's
exactly.
a head and it hits me first, and then it kind of swoops under and like sideswipes you. So yeah,
Yeah.
it works
Wow.
perfect. I get to tell you, it's
Yeah.
good,
So,
bad,
and
ugly, or in
yes.
between.
So Rachel predicts the future, not just for revenue cycle management, but for weather for one very specific person as well. But speaking of tumultuous times and stormy things, we are talking about one of the stormier parts of revenue cycle management for Infusion today. And that's why we brought in our resident expert on Infusion revenue cycle management, Tina Ratliff. Hey, Tina, how are you today?
Great. How are you guys doing?
Fantastic. I am really excited about this one because we're going to be talking about the importance of a feedback loop, which is something that a lot of back office teams don't have. So, Rachel, why don't we get started with you talking a bit about the importance of a revenue feedback loop, and then we'll bring in Tina and she'll share some insights.
Absolutely. Why is the feedback loop important, and what is the struggle with it, right? So I'm going to get in and ask Tina to answer some of these questions for us, but just sort of anecdotally, when I think about the feedback loop, it's difficult for many reasons, right? So number one, we have a lot of our leads and managers who tend to spend a lot of their time simply managing data, so they don't even have time to get to the things that need to be audited and reviewed and the feedback that needs to be given. So let's assume that we get through that hurdle and we have a dedicated quality team. Your next challenge then becomes, how do I decide what it is that I'm going to audit, and what is the best format for me to these results back to my team, and not just the results, right? We don't want to just audit something and give a spreadsheet and say, here's your feedback. It's a little bit more broad than that. And Tina is perfect because I happen to know personally that she has been working on this very project for quite some time. So, Tina, we look forward to hearing what kind of expertise you can offer.
Awesome. Well, yeah. So I just started a huge project that went live on the 6th of this month, where we are doing auditing a percentage of production work. So we also have an auditor that audit the people who do our auditing, since we have multiple people here that do that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So if it's big enough, if your auditing team is big enough, then you might need that as well.
Who audits the auditor?
Yes. So we want to make sure we have our very best doing this auditing are people with a lot of experience, right? Because the people doing the auditing need to know more than the people they are auditing, right? Knowing less is not a great setup.
No. So step number one, make sure the person doing your auditing.
Yes, that they
knows
know
what they're talking
what
about.
they're doing. So you might even have like maybe your, someone there audit them, even if it's just occasionally, just to make sure that, there's not some information that they've, forgotten, or there's not new changes with payers that they may not have picked up and are auditing for. So it's always good to do that. And with your audit, how the auditing helps is, so right now we audit 10% of all production work on experienced employees and 100% of new. So, yep. So, that kind of helps us, one, to know, is that new person really ready to be on the floor and be doing actual production work, right? We want to make sure that they're not flying under the radar, because if you're big enough and you have enough people, you can have people that it takes you a long time before you figure out, oh, we're getting all these denials. Oh, this person doesn't understand. So that kind of gets to that, finds that person a lot quicker than when there's an issue.
So I have a question, right? Because I do want to go beyond anecdotal for those who are listening. So how does it actually work? Like, what does an auditor's day sort of look like? Is there a portion built in where it's a live discussion based on a prior, like what does it look like? What does my day as an
Yeah,
auditor look like?
so yeah, so we will pull a list of randomized work. So we don't let the auditors pick their own work. We give them a good random sampling of different payers, different therapies, so that it's a good mix. They get their list of who they need, which accounts they need to audit. They go in. We have questionnaires that we've built, and there's a few different types of document programs. I know Rachel Sierra uses one. I can't think of the name
Jot
of it.
forms.
Jot Forms.
Yeah.
That's a great one. I personally use
Teams
Microsoft
or
Forms.
Microsoft
Yeah,
Forms is what I meant to say. I said
yeah,
Teams like a silly person. Microsoft Forms.
yeah.
Yep.
And I use the Microsoft Forms. Microsoft Forms is kind of like a questionnaire for those of you that don't know, because I was not familiar with it until I came to work here. But Microsoft Forms, you can create almost like questionnaires that you can fill out, kind of like if you're filling out a fillable document, and it has a submit button at the end. When you do that, it feeds into a spreadsheet. So, and then the form, once you hit submit, becomes empty again and you go to your next invoice. So you can design the questions to be whatever you want them to be. Sometimes ours change. If there's a new process that we need to be doing that is different, we'll throw some questions on there just to make sure that new process is happening.
Yep.
So you can take things away if you're like, okay, we're getting the NDC units on the claim correctly. I can stop auditing for this for a
Yep.
while. You can tweak that form to be whatever questions you want. And so as they're filling them out, each question is a column. Each answer to each question is a column on a spreadsheet. And you can take that spreadsheet. We'll take that spreadsheet after, they've completed their audit and turn it into data. So how many things did we get, did each person get wrong? Is it, you're also it's a lot easier to see oopsie daisies versus lack of
You can
knowledge.
see
So
trends,
when you're
right?
going,
If you're
yeah,
once you get the data collected. So we're doing it with forms. Some software systems, even ours, has some of this sort of built in, right, Tina? So your point being, get so per process, one process equals one form, right? And
right.
then you've built out the forms carefully so that they're able to quickly calculate and identify and call out trends for you.
Yeah, and one of the things we did too that was really helpful is to make this a quicker audit is we put the questions in order of where you will go in your patient medical record system to find the answers.
Nice.
Yeah, so that we're not jumping all around our system trying to answer these questions in a crazy format. We actually put them in the order that you would open the account to where you were done so that,
Oh,
it flows
man.
better.
What about the feedback? So how does the engineer that did the work, right? The engineer that's being audited, I call everybody engineers, by the way, because we're all some kind of an engineer, right? So
Mhm.
the engineer that did the work, that we're auditing, how do they get their feedback? What does that look like on your team?
So what happens is the lead will go back to that person and have them make the correction. And just let them know, hey, this doesn't have a modifier. These are the make sure you put your modifier. We're going to need to correct this claim. And so that they can, because we could easily fix it during the audit. We really could. But the problem is that doesn't really help anyone. We You need to do it to remember, right? Um, you need to touch it. A lot of people need to touch it. And it kind of keeps them from going, oh, I can't forget this modifier. It's going to come back to me. I got to put this modifier on.
Does so this sort of brings us to the softer side of that feedback loop. So what I'm hearing is on your team, the person QAing isn't the person giving the feedback. There's actually a lead who's monitoring all of the responses that are coming in and sort of looking at these trends. And then that lead is
Yeah.
going back and working with the person that actually did the work. Do you have any?
But in their organization, your lead could be the
Correct.
same
Right,
person who's
right. That's my
auditing.
point,
Yeah.
right? So do you have any
Mhm.
tips or tricks you could share on the soft sort of verbal delivery of that kind of feedback? Like I always try, Tina, to combine a positive with a negative, right? So I'm asking
Oh,
like,
yeah, yeah.
what kind of tips do you
I
have
see what
like
you're
that?
saying.
The poo sandwich, if you will.
Well, you know, sometimes you don't have to call anybody out at all. Sometimes, we can set up a training the next day and invite the people who do that work and go over those things that we're finding in that data from the audit. So, like if we find that somebody's having a really hard time with making sure that their collection note has all the details that we require in a collection note, um, we'll do a training with the whole team on what goes into a collection note, and so, um, just to kind of, it's a refresher for those who know, and big help for those who are struggling. So sometimes we don't necessarily even have to call anyone out. We'll just do a training and we'll say we've noticed on some of our audits that some people get this wrong. And so we just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. And we kind of deliver it more like that so that that person gets that training. But also, it's a good refresher for others.
Yep. All right. What else, Tina, might you have? Anything else you can think of that any advice you would give to somebody implementing a internal audit feedback loop?
Um, the biggest thing is just have obtainable goals. So if you one of the things we had to do with our document was we did a time study to see how long it takes someone to complete the form, right? Because I don't want to say I need you to audit 30 accounts a day when the audit form takes them, 20 minutes to fill out. That's that might not necessarily in their lunch, it might not necessarily be feasible. So you want to make sure you don't set up goals that aren't obtainable first as far as what you're auditing.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. And then decide what are your KPIs? What is your accuracy expectation? Because we can't really say 100% because
Right.
everybody's going to make a mistake, right? So you're going to need to come up with what is your accuracy percentage? What's your magic number? So you'll have to come up with those types of things as well.
And I know in my world that typically, it's been a long time since I've actually touched anything, right? But in
Mm.
my world, that's usually very dependent on the process. And sometimes it's even broken down further, Tina, by like process and
Mm.
product groups. So on your side, maybe process and category, right?
Or how long the person's been there, or
Yeah.
there's a lot of little things that you have to kind of put into that number. The other thing is determining what on your audit form is critical versus non-critical. So what's going
Yeah.
to get you denied versus what is just not the process, or it's going to make like, take your net revenue price on your claims. Well, that's not going to get you denied by the payer, but it's going to make your revenue look bad if it's overinflated or underinflated. So that would be a case of a non-critical error if someone did not make sure to put the real revenue values in.
And a critical error would be maybe we put something through and it's not going to get denied. It is going to get paid, but it just shouldn't, right?
Right. Or it's going to not be paid at all. Yeah.
Not be paid at all, right?
Yep.
Paid or be taken back or not be paid at all. Usually
Exactly.
critical.
Yep. Yep.
All
So
right.
that's probably the biggest things right up front to determine and set up.
The last thing I might say is the worst thing that you could do when you're thinking of rolling out, sort of an audit program or an internal feedback loop, the worst thing you could possibly do is not do it.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
Not do it at all. Right.
That is a huge risk that you're leaving yourself liable to.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's going to be extra work, but the amount of work it saves you when the inevitable issue comes up
Yeah.
is
I've never been somewhere in revenue cycle management where we didn't have a solid like audit team in place. But I think what is really cool is all of the cool new tools that are available, even outside of software programs, right at your fingertips, right?
Mhm.
The Microsoft Forms, the Jot forms and stuff like that. Like that's the little trinket here,
Yeah.
right? Is never has it been easier for an audit team to get a workflow process.
And it's so important because one of the things I hear a lot that it always surprises me is, we'll talk to a company and they'll say, well, we had a really bad biller that didn't know what she was doing for like a whole year. And I'm like,
Why did you let that happen?
yes. And it's like,
Why?
yes. And so you could have, found that in a week if you would audit. You would have
That's
found
correct.
and pulled her off of that in a week.
Mhm.
That is correct.
Maybe
Yeah.
got 4 or 5 denials versus hundreds of denials. So
Yep.
Wow.
Gotta look.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, very cool. Well, Tina, again, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. Where can people find you, follow you if they have any questions or want to get to know you a little better?
I am on LinkedIn, and then you can also email me at tinar@prochant.com.
All right. Fantastic. Well, again, thank you, Tina, and thank you, listeners, for making it to the end of another edition of the Modern Healthcare Back Office. We so appreciate your likes, shares, subscribes on the YouTube channel. And if you are listening to us on your podcast app, go rate us 5 stars if you can. It really helps a lot with the show getting discovered. And thank you.
Hey, Chuck,
Hey, Rachel.
isn't there a way that if somebody wanted to be on one of our episodes, they might be able to?
Yes. Thank you, Rachel. And we are actively looking for guests who have expertise in healthcare back offices that would like to share their experiences. Please go to the ProChant website, prochant.com, and click on the little podcast button at the top menu, and you'll see right at the top of that page a little form that says, be a guest on our show. And you can fill that out, and Rachel and I will look it over, and we'll be in touch. So, again, thank you so much for listening, watching, wherever you are, and we'll see you again next time. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Modern Healthcare Back Office, a presentation of ProChant, a wholly owned revenue cycle management service dedicated to serving HME, pharmacy infusion, and other healthcare providers. Learn more about us at prochant.com.